In the New Testament, Jesus is tempted by Satan. He's discredited by Satan. Satan says, surely you're not who you say you are. And then Peter, when he's writing to one of the early churches, in chapter 5, verse 8, says, Satan is a tempter and a deceiver, roaming around like a roaring lion, waiting to devour those who lose their focus, who stop focusing on Jesus. So we have Joshua, the high priest, the Lord, and Satan. And as this is a law court, there's an accusation. Satan is the prosecutor in this vision. He's the accuser. What's his accusation? Well, we'll look at it in a bit more detail, but he doesn't even get to that. But the general accusation that he would be levying is that Joshua, the high priest, and the Israelites don't deserve to be in God's presence. His argument will be based on the fact that, as we see in verse 3, Joshua presents himself in dirty clothes. The reason his clothes are dirty is a symbol of how sinful the Jewish nation have been. They've seen God take them from captivity in Egypt, do amazing miracles. Within a few, it sounds like weeks of them being taken out of Egypt, they're worshipping false idols, they're creating golden calves, they're getting drunk, and they're just looking for anyone that they can praise. They wander around in the desert for 40 years, and then they come to the promised land. But then they take God for granted again. They think that because they have a temple, because God has shown favor to them, they don't have to worry about following his laws anymore. And they end up doing all sorts of terrible things again, and they're taken off into captivity. Satan would think, in, I guess, what the American law court dramas would say, that he had a slam dunk case. There was no way that Joshua, representing the Israelites, could stand up to this argument that he didn't, that Joshua and the Israelites deserved to be in God's presence. He would say there is no chance that they deserve to be in God's presence. Look at his clothes. Look at his sin. He's dirty. But if we look at verse 2, Satan doesn't even get a word in. I'll read it out to you now. The Lord said to Satan, "The Lord says no to you, Satan. The Lord who has chosen Jerusalem says no to you. This man was like a burning stick pulled from the fire." It's great, isn't it? Joshua's standing there without a case. He knows that he's in dirty clothes. He knows that the sin of himself and his nation means that he doesn't deserve to be in God's presence, that he doesn't deserve to be in relationship with God. But before Satan gets a word in to accuse him, to put him down, God, the judge, interrupts and says, "No, I'm not going to let you speak, Satan. I'm not going to let you accuse Joshua or the Israelites." He says, "No, I'm choosing them and I'm rejecting you." God says that this man was like a burning stick pulled from the fire. Essentially what he's saying there is that Joshua and the people that he represents have dirtied themselves. They've got themselves into so much trouble that there's almost no hope. And when a stick goes into the fire, it gets burnt and then it's no longer there. God says that Joshua, this nation, is a stick that's been in the fire. It's getting burnt up. It's being consumed by its dirtiness, by its wrongdoing. But he says, "I've chosen it. I've pulled it out from the fire." And then we go on to find out that God has pulled out this nation, this person from the fire, because he plans to remove their sin. I'm just going to read verses 3 to 5 again. Joshua was wearing dirty clothes and was standing in front of the angel. The angel said to those standing in front of him, "Take off those dirty clothes." Then the angel said to Joshua, "Look, I have taken away your sin from you, and I'm giving you beautiful, fine clothes." Then I said, "Put a clean turban on his head." So they put a clean turban on his head and dressed him, while the Lord's angel stood there. As I've said, the dirty clothes symbolize both Joshua's and the nation's sin. But Jesus says, "Look, I'm taking away that sin. I'm taking away that shame. I'm taking away the doom that awaits you because of these actions. And I'm going to replace it with fine new clothes." So he takes away shame, sin, and destruction. And instead, he offers them beauty. He offers them cleanliness. He offers them peace and joy. Zechariah understood what he was seeing here. He was seeing that the sins of the person, the sins of the nation, were being taken away, and that they were being renewed and they were becoming acceptable before God. And I think he just can't contain himself as he sees this image unfold, and he shouts out. He wants to get involved, and he says, "Put a turban on his head too." And God responds. And I think that shows that God is a God who fills our cup to overflowing. It's what it says in Psalms. That he doesn't just get rid of our sin, and he doesn't just make us new, but he blesses us in such amazing ways. So Zechariah is seeing this vision unfold. He's seen a nation that has been rejected. He's seen Satan be silenced, and he's seen the high priest, the nation, be made new. But he goes on to explain how this is going to take place in verses 8 and 9. He says, "Listen, Joshua, the high priest and your friends who are sitting in front of you, they stand for what will happen. I'm going to bring my servant called the branch. Look, I put this stone in front of Joshua, a stone with 7 sides. I will carve a message on it, and in one day I will take away the sin of this land." Now, this must have been an important bit of this vision, because God says, "Listen." This indicates to Joshua, Zechariah, who's seen the vision, and us, that we need to pay attention, that God's going to say something that we need to have our ears ready for. He says that on one day, the sins of this nation will be removed. And he says that he's going to send a servant called the branch. And I think the Bible's such an amazing book, because it was written over a period of about 1,000 years by over 40 different authors, from shepherds to kings to fishermen to doctors. And it all speaks about a God, and it all is so consistent, and it all is so revealing of God's love for us and God's character. And if we just take this idea of a branch and we say, "Oh, let's have a look in the Bible and see, where else a mention of a branch is, and what does it say?" In 750 BC, the book of Isaiah was written. This is about 250 years before this book was written. And there's an amazing passage that is so encouraging to read about the suffering servant in Isaiah chapter 53. And it talks about a branch, the beginnings of a tree, being sent from God to the nation. And it describes in an incredible detail the life that this servant, that this branch will have. And then when you read in the New Testament about the life of Jesus, it's so similar. And you think that 750 years before Jesus came, there was this prophecy. There was such intimate and detailed descriptions of a life that was 750 years away, but it still takes place. And it's because of this prophecy that's taken place 750 years ago, talking about a branch. It's because of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection